Patanjali begins the Kaivalya Pada, the final chapter on absolute liberation, by demystifying supernatural powers. He lists 5 methods to attain them: birth, chemical herbs, sacred mantras, fierce discipline, or samadhi. Sage Vyas warns that powers gained through psychedelics or birth are highly unstable, acting like a cheap biological hack. The nervous system is artificially forced open without the necessary structural reinforcement. Only the abilities forged through the relentless psychological friction of samadhi permanently restructure the nervous system, allowing the yogi to handle massive cosmic voltage without suffering a catastrophic psychological crash. Sutra 4.2 explains the mechanics of biological and spiritual mutation, the transformation into another species, or a higher state of existence, is accomplished entirely by the overflow of Prakriti, the fundamental energy of nature. The ancient masters viewed evolution not merely as a random Darwinian mutation, but as a pressurized, thermodynamic system. When a practitioner builds immense psychological pressure through discipline, the boundary of their current biological limitations shatters. The divine, boundless energy of nature simply floods in like a breached dam, instantaneously mutating their cellular structure and cognitive bandwidth to match their highly advanced state of awareness. But personal effort does not actually create this transformation. Patanjali uses a brilliant agricultural metaphor in Sutra 4.3. The incidental cause does not stir nature into action, it merely removes the obstacles, exactly like a farmer opening an irrigation gate. The farmer does not carry the water, he simply removes the mud blocking the flow, and gravity does the rest. In daily life, you do not physically manufacture inner peace, brilliance, or joy. Your ego, your unresolved trauma, and your toxic habits are simply the mud blocking the flow. Yoga is the brutal, systematic act of removing the mud. Once the psychological blockage is destroyed, the infinite power of the universe organically floods your life. Sutra 4.4 states a profound psychological dynamic. In advanced stages, created minds are produced solely from asmita, the fundamental sense of egoism. While ancient texts speak of yogis creating multiple physical bodies, modern psychology maps this as the fracturing of human roles. We construct distinct, artificial personalities, the corporate boss, the obedient child, the romantic partner, to navigate different environments. The yogi realizes that all these social masks, no matter how complex or different they appear, are fundamentally hollow. They are constructed entirely from the single, vibrating core of the primal ego. To manage these multiple roles, Sutra 4.5 provides the anchor. One original mind directs the many created minds in their diverse activities. Despite the multitude of artificial roles and fragmented personalities we deploy every day, there is only one original, directing consciousness. If you do not recognize the master control room, the various masks you wear in society will war against each other, causing profound cognitive dissonance and exhaustion. By tracing all your conflicting desires and anxieties back to the single, underlying director, you regain absolute sovereignty over your own psychological kingdom, bringing all fragmented actions into perfect alignment. Of all these varying minds and mental states, Sutra 4.6 isolates the only one that guarantees freedom. Of these, the mind born of profound meditation is entirely free from karmic residue. The ordinary mind operates on a strictly transactional basis. Every thought of jealousy, anger, or desire leaves a sticky, toxic receipt called ashahyam in the subconscious. But the meditative mind is a flawless, frictionless mirror. It acts in the world with absolute precision, yet because it expects zero reward, claims zero ego, and harbors zero fear, it leaves absolutely no karmic footprint. It operates completely outside the cosmic accounting system. Patanjali categorizes all human action in Sutra 4.7. The karma of a fully awakened yogi is neither white nor black. For everyone else, it is threefold. Ordinary human karma is black, meaning toxic and cruel, white, meaning virtuous and kind, or mixed, which is the agonizing, ambiguous reality of daily human existence. But the karma of a master is utterly colorless. They perform massive, globally impactful actions, yet because they are entirely disconnected from the ego's addictive desire for results, their actions generate zero psychological backlash. They are essentially invisible to the universal laws of cause and effect. For the rest of humanity, Sutra 4.8 reveals a terrifying mechanical truth. From these karmic actions, only those subconscious tendencies manifest which are exactly suitable for their environment to sprout. Our subconscious is an infinite vault of dormant karmic seeds, known as vasanas. You may think you have conquered an old addiction or completely healed from a toxic relationship, but the seed is merely sleeping. The moment you are placed in an environment that matches its frequency, a specific smell, a tone of voice, or a location, the vasana violently detonates, hijacking your nervous system without warning. The environment acts as a precise chemical trigger for the trauma. This leads to Sutra 4.9, which establishes the terrifying, unbroken continuity of trauma. There is an unbroken continuity of tendencies, even though separated by species, space, and time, because memory and subconscious impressions are fundamentally identical. Even if a specific karmic seed is separated by millions of years, different biological incarnations, or vast geographic distances, it maintains absolute, mathematical continuity. A phobia or a violent reaction you experience today is not random, it is the exact continuation of a psychological wound inflicted lifetimes ago. Time and physical space offer absolutely zero protection against unresolved karma. It will follow the soul across the universe until it is actively destroyed by yoga. Why are these toxic impressions so deeply, impossibly embedded? Patanjali delivers a haunting answer in Sutra 4.10. These tendencies are beginningless because the primal desire for life is eternal. At the very bottom of the human subconscious, beneath all other fears, lies the most agonizing and terrifying affliction, the primal, desperate biological hunger to exist. Every single neurosis, every defense mechanism, every act of greed, and every war fought by humans is a convoluted strategy to avoid annihilation. True liberation demands the yogi to turn the laser of awareness directly onto this core survival instinct, starving the eternal fear of death at its absolute biological root. Patanjali left us with the horrifying realization that the subconscious seeds of trauma are beginningless. But Sutra 4.11 provides the ultimate structural antidote, because these karmic seeds are held together by cause, effect, substrate, and object. The destruction of these four pillars inevitably leads to the total destruction of the seeds themselves. Hariharananda Aranya explains the architecture of trauma. A psychological wound cannot float freely, it requires structural support. It needs a cause, ignorance. It needs an effect, the generation of anxiety. It needs a substrate, the biological mind to hold it. And it needs an object, the external trigger to obsess over. The yogi does not fight the trauma directly. Instead, through the relentless practice of yoga, they systematically dismantle these four pillars. Without its structural support, the deepest, most ancient psychological agony instantly collapses into dust. Sutra 4.12 radically alters our understanding of time and physics. The past and the future exist in their own absolute reality, differing only in the time state of their characteristics. Sage Vyas asserts that nothing is ever truly created or destroyed. A tree does not pop into existence from nothing. It exists infinitely as a potential within the seed. Therefore, your past traumas and your future potentials are not mere ideas, they are actual, energetic realities currently existing in different quantum states. The yogi realizes that time is merely the mechanical shifting of characteristics. By deeply understanding this, the ego stops agonizing over the unchangeable past and stops fearing the inevitable future, resting sovereignly in the eternal present. Patanjali explains the fundamental fabric of these changing characteristics in Sutra 4.13, whether they are manifest in the physical present or hidden as subtle potential in the past and future. All things are fundamentally composed of the three gunas. The three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, are the primary colors of the universe. They represent illumination, violent activity, and heavy inertia. Every single emotion you feel, every thought you think, and every physical object you touch is simply a different mathematical ratio of these three forces braided together. When you suffer from a depressive episode, it is not a flaw in your soul, it is simply a temporary, mechanical surplus of tamas in your nervous system. This realization brutally depersonalizes human suffering. Sutra 4.14 explains how these chaotic forces form solid reality. The reality and uniqueness of any object is due to the absolute uniqueness of the transformation and combination of the gunas. If everything is just swirling energy, why does a rock feel solid? Because, for a specific duration of time, the three gunas lock into a highly specific, unified ratio. This generates the illusion of a cohesive, permanent object. But the yogi knows this solidity is a temporary trick of physics. Your current personality, your current struggles, and your current identity are just temporary ratios of energy. Because they are assembled, they can be entirely disassembled and reassembled by the fierce discipline of yoga. Patanjali permanently destroys the philosophy of solipsism in Sutra 4.15. Even though an external object is exactly the same, the perception of it varies wildly because of the different minds perceiving it. Therefore, the mind and the object follow entirely separate paths. This is the ultimate proof of objective reality versus subjective hallucination. A $100 bill sitting on a table is objectively just paper and ink. But if three different minds look at it, one experiences desperate greed, one experiences crippling anxiety over debt, and one feels complete indifference. The object did not generate the suffering. The suffering was manufactured entirely by the toxic, colored filters of the individual minds. Reality is neutral, it is your ego that violently colors it with pain. To crush the ego's arrogance further, Sutra 4.16 states, and an object is absolutely not dependent on a single mind. If it were, what would happen to the object when that specific mind is not looking at it? The human ego arrogantly believes that the universe revolves around its own perception. Patanjali brutally dismantles this. If reality depended on your mind to exist, the world would vanish the second you went to sleep. The physical universe operates on its own sovereign, independent mechanics. It does not need you. Realizing this completely destroys the narcissistic neurosis that you must constantly control the outcomes of your life. The universe will manage itself perfectly well without your frantic, exhausting micromanagement. If objects exist independently, how do we know them? Sutra 4.17 explains, an object is known or unknown to the mind depending strictly on whether the mind is colored or tinted by that object. Sage Vyas uses the metaphor of a magnetic field. The mind is a highly sensitive, receptive canvas. It acts like a sponge. When you focus on a toxic news article, your mind literally absorbs its frequency and becomes colored by toxicity, instantly generating biological anxiety. When you focus on a divine mantra, your mind is colored by peace. You are entirely at the mercy of whatever you allow to color your consciousness. The yogi becomes ruthlessly disciplined about what they allow their attention to touch. Sutra 4.18 introduces the absolute anchor of existence. The chaotic fluctuations of the mind are always known to their Lord, the pure soul, because the pure soul is utterly unchanging and immutable. Your mind fluctuates millions of times a day. It is happy, then terrified, then bored. If your core identity was the mind, you would lack any continuous sense of self. You would be a fragmented blur of reactions. The only reason you have a continuous sense of I is because there is a silent, unblinking, eternal master, the Purusha, sitting perfectly still at the center of the storm, watching the mind spin. Finding this silent watcher is the ultimate goal of all psychological therapy and spiritual practice. Patanjali deals a fatal blow to the intellect's pride in Sutra 4.19. The mind is definitely not self-illuminating, because it is merely an object of perception. It is the seen, not the seer. Modern science frequently confuses the brain with consciousness. The yogi knows the brain is just spectacular biological hardware. Like a highly advanced computer, it processes data, but a computer does not know that it is processing data. The mind has absolutely no light of its own. It only appears to be conscious because the blazing, radiant light of the immortal soul reflects off it. To worship human intellect while ignoring the soul is like worshipping a mirror while ignoring the sun. Sutra 4.20 concludes this sequence by defining the absolute processing limit of the human brain, and both the mind itself and the external object it is perceiving cannot be comprehended simultaneously. The mind is a sequential processor. It can look outward at a tree, or it can turn inward and look at its own memory of a tree, but it biologically cannot do both in the exact same millisecond. It must rapidly toggle back and forth. This mechanical limitation proves once and for all that the mind is just a finite, restricted instrument. It is not the infinite, all-encompassing awareness. Recognizing the pathetic limitations of your own intellect allows you to finally drop it and rest in the infinite, simultaneous awareness of the soul. Patanjali established that the mind is not self-illuminating. In Sutra 4.21, he destroys the opposing argument through absolute logic. If one mind were to be perceived by another mind, there would be an infinite regress of cognitions, resulting in a total collapse and confusion of memory. Sage Vyas frames this as a catastrophic software glitch. If your brain needs a second brain to watch it, then that second brain needs a third brain to watch it, extending infinitely. Your nervous system would instantly crash under the mathematical impossibility of infinite processing. Because we clearly do not suffer from infinite regress, there must be a final, unmoving, non-biological observer at the absolute center of our being. This is the immortal soul, observing the mind without needing to be observed itself. Sutra 4.22 reveals the precise mechanics of consciousness. The pure consciousness of the soul, though completely unmoving and unchanging, becomes aware of its own intelligence by reflecting its light onto the intellect, which takes the form of that consciousness. Hariharananda Aranya compares this to the sun casting its reflection on a perfectly calm lake. The sun never moves, and it never gets wet. Yet, the lake brilliantly reflects the shape of the sun. The human intellect is a biological mirror. Purusha, the soul, shines its infinite, unblemished light onto the brain. The brain then falsely believes it is generating the light. By realizing the brain is just a reflective surface, you completely detach your identity from the fragile mirror, anchoring yourself permanently in the sun. Sutra 4.23 summarizes the magnificent dual capacity of human psychology. The mind, when colored by both the seer and the seen, is capable of understanding absolutely everything. The mind is a cosmic chameleon. It stands exactly at the border between infinity and biology. On one side, it is bathed in the golden, eternal light of the soul. On the other side, it is deeply stained by the red, violent, chaotic impressions of the physical world. This dual coloring is what allows human beings to be the ultimate evolutionary bridge. We have the unique cognitive architecture to survive in the brutal, physical trench of material existence, while simultaneously possessing the bandwidth to comprehend the infinite geometry of the divine. Sutra 4.24 shatters the mind's delusion of grandeur. The mind, though variegated with countless thousands of desires and dormant traumas, exists strictly for the sake of another, because it operates only in combination. This is an ancient law of physics. Anything that is assembled from multiple parts, like a car, a computer, or a human brain, cannot exist for its own sake. It is a machine, built to serve a master who is not made of parts. The brain is an incredibly complex biological machine, saturated with the toxic coding of past samskaras. It does not exist for itself. It exists entirely to serve the silent, partless, indivisible master, the soul. When the machine arrogantly tries to become the master, human suffering begins. Sutra 4.25 marks the end of existential dread. For one who has finally seen this absolute distinction between the mind and the soul, the agonizing pondering over the nature of the self completely ceases. Humanity is plagued by the desperate, terrifying questions: who am I? Why am I here? What happens when I die? These questions generate a crippling background radiation of anxiety in our daily lives. But when the yogi applies the razor of discernment and directly witnesses their own immortal nature, the questions simply vaporize. You no longer need to philosophize about who you are, because you are resting in the unshakable, self-evident, biological realization of your own eternal sovereignty. The search is permanently over. Sutra 4.26 describes the gravitational shift of the awakened nervous system. Then, the mind inclines powerfully toward absolute discrimination and gravitates irresistibly toward kaivalya, total liberation. In the beginning of a spiritual practice, you have to fight uphill. The mind wants to scroll social media, consume toxic drama, and feed the ego. You have to force it to meditate. But Sage Vyas explains that at this highly advanced stage, the magnetic polarity of the brain flips. Just as a heavy boulder inevitably rolls down a mountain, the yogi's mind is now magnetically pulled toward the infinite void. Stillness is no longer a struggle, it becomes the terrifying, beautiful, unstoppable momentum of the mind rushing back to its cosmic source. But Patanjali issues a sobering warning in Sutra 4.27. Even in this profoundly advanced state, during the microscopic breaks of discriminative awareness, other thoughts and distractions will arise from past impressions. No human is immediately immune to biological relapse. You may be in a state of deep, blissful clarity, but if your awareness drops for a fraction of a second, an ancient, dormant trauma, a samskara, will instantly leak through the crack in your psychological armor. A sudden flash of jealousy, ego, or fear will momentarily hijack the system. Patanjali includes this sutra to destroy spiritual arrogance. Absolute vigilance is required until the very last millisecond of the journey. How do we deal with these final relapses? Sutra 4.28 states, their removal is accomplished exactly as described previously for the kleshas, the deep afflictions. You do not panic when the ego leaks back in. You apply the exact same ruthless technology you learned in Chapter 2. You use fierce discipline to attenuate the thought, and the laser of meditation to incinerate it. By treating these advanced, subtle distractions with the same brutal efficiency as you treated your gross addictions, you permanently seal the microscopic cracks in your consciousness, ensuring the mind remains an impenetrable fortress of light. This brings us to the ultimate, crowning meditation. Sutra 4.29 reveals Dharma Megha Samadhi. For one who is completely disinterested even in the highest state of omniscience, from constant, unbroken discernment comes the Samadhi called the cloud of virtue. This is the absolute pinnacle of human evolution. The yogi has attained omniscience, power, and clarity. Yet, recognizing that even this cosmic power is a trap, the yogi rejects it entirely. By utterly abandoning all desire for reward, the universe responds with a torrential downpour of grace. Dharma Megha translates to the cloud of virtue. It rains absolute, uncorrupted purity onto the nervous system, washing away the final, atomic traces of the ego. The yogi becomes a walking embodiment of divine physics. The physiological consequence of the cloud of virtue is stated in Sutra 4.30. From that state, there is an absolute and permanent cessation of all afflictions and all karma. This is the moment the psychological hard drive is completely wiped. The 5 kleshas, ignorance, ego, attachment, aversion, and the fear of death, are incinerated at the root. The ledger of karma is deleted. The yogi can continue to walk, talk, and act in the physical world, but they are essentially a ghost in the machine. Their actions no longer generate any psychological ripples. They are completely liberated while still breathing, existing in a state of flawless, invincible sovereignty known as Jivanmukti. Sutra 4.31 describes the staggering scale of this awakened consciousness. Then, by the total removal of all obscuring veils and impurities, knowledge becomes infinite, and that which is left to be known becomes minuscule. Hariharananda Aranya provides a beautiful analogy. Before liberation, the human intellect is like a firefly trying to illuminate a massive, dark forest. It sees only fragments of reality. But when the veil of the ego is destroyed, consciousness expands into an infinite, blazing sun. The entire physical universe, which once seemed so terrifying, complex, and overwhelmingly large, shrinks into a tiny, insignificant speck. The mind realizes that human intellect is a drop, but the true self is the boundless ocean. Because the soul is now free, Sutra 4.32 declares the retirement of the physical universe. Then, the succession of transformations of the 3 gunas comes to a permanent end, having entirely fulfilled their cosmic purpose. The fundamental forces of nature, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, do not exist to torture us. They are a highly advanced evolutionary matrix designed solely to educate the soul. Once the yogi has learned the final lesson and awakened from the nightmare of suffering, the gunas simply pack up their bags and stop functioning for that specific individual. The cosmic movie projector turns off because the audience member has finally walked out of the theater. Sutra 4.33 provides the final definition of time. The succession of changes is perceived as a sequence of discrete moments, recognized only at the absolute end of a transformation. Time is the ultimate illusion of the biological mind. It is nothing more than the brain stitching together microscopic changes in matter to create a storyline. With the gunas halted and the mind completely stilled in the cloud of virtue, the mechanism of time shatters. The yogi steps completely outside of linear time. There is no past to regret, and no future to fear. There is only the colossal, eternal, unchanging reality of the absolute now. We arrive at Sutra 4.34. The absolute conclusion of the Yoga Sutras. Patanjali defines the final state, Kaivalya, liberation, is the involution of the gunas, which are now devoid of any purpose for the soul. Or, it is the establishment of the power of consciousness residing eternally in its own pure, majestic nature. This is the grand finale of human evolution. Pratiprasava is the cosmic rewinding of reality. The physical body, the senses, the intellect, and the ego all fold inward, collapsing back into the unmanifest void from which they came. The agonizing, multimillennial journey of suffering is definitively over. The immortal soul, Purusha, is left standing utterly alone in the center of the infinite. It requires nothing, it fears nothing, and it seeks nothing. It rests forever in its own blinding, unutterable perfection. The path is complete.